Hey everyone, welcome to Real Tales from Greenfield. Today's podcast, it's going to be like a deep dive into the universe and all its mysteries. So, have you ever looked up at the stars and thought, what's like out there that we're not seeing? Today we're going to talk about something that's kind of mind-blowing, self-engulfing. Yeah, it sounds super sci-fi, right? But trust me, by the end of this, you'll be like totally hooked on the whole story. So strap in or, just get comfy and let's venture into, well, the unknown.
The Whispers and the Walls. In a quiet village, nestled between mist-covered hills and dense forests, there stood a small, weathered cottage at the end of a forgotten lane. Its windows were always dark, its door creaked in the wind, and strange shadows seemed to move within when no one was looking. The townspeople whispered that the cottage had been abandoned for years, but there was always a single light flickering in the attic at night, like a beacon guiding lost souls toward it. One chilly autumn evening, a young woman named Elanor, tired of the mundane life in the village, decided she would investigate. Her curiosity had always gotten the best of her, and this time it would lead her to the house everyone feared. As she walked down the overgrown path toward the cottage, the wind howled through the trees, and a heavy fog began to roll in, curling around her feet like cold fingers. The leaves crunched under her boots, but everything else was eerily still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Elanor reached the door and, with a hesitant glance behind her, pushed it open. The hinges groaned in protest, but the door opened wide. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of something old, decaying. Her footsteps echoed as she stepped in, the creaking floorboards sending a chill through her. The living room was bare except for a few broken pieces of furniture covered in sheets. In the dim light of her lantern, Elanor noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols carved deep into the wood, half hidden under layers of peeling wallpaper. They were like nothing she had ever seen before, twisting and curling in unnatural patterns. As she continued deeper into the house, she felt an odd weight pressing on her chest. The air was heavier here, like the house itself was watching her. She ascended the staircase, her heart pounding louder with each step. At the top, the narrow hallway seemed to stretch longer than it should, its walls covered in the same strange symbols as downstairs. There was one door at the end of the hallway, the attic. Eleanor's lantern flickered violently, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. She could feel her pulse quicken as she reached for the door handle. It was cold, too cold, and she hesitated before twisting it open. Inside, the attic was even darker, the only light coming from the faint flicker of an old candle on a wooden table. But it wasn't the candle that caught her attention, it was the walls. Carved into the wooden beams were more symbols, but this time they were different. They weren't just markings, they were words. The words seemed to whisper in a language she didn't understand, but somehow she could hear them in her mind, faint murmurs at the edge of her consciousness. The temperature in the attic dropped suddenly, and Elanor felt a shiver crawl down her spine. She tried to turn back, but the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening crash. Her heart raced. She fumbled with the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic gripped her, and she turned back toward the room. That's when she saw them. Eyes. They were everywhere, glowing faintly in the dark corners of the attic. At first, she thought they were just reflections of the candlelight, but they moved. Slowly, their gaze followed her, always just out of reach, never blinking. Then, as if they were waiting for something, they all shifted at once, focusing on a single point in the corner of the room. There, in the shadows, a figure emerged. It was tall, impossibly tall and thin. Its skin was the color of ash, its eyes hollow and black. Its hands were long, spindly, and twitching as though they were reaching for something it wanted to take. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come. The figure took a step forward, and with it came a soft whisper, like a breath against her ear. "I see you." The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing in with a terrible, crushing weight. The figure's hands reached toward her, but before they could touch her, the whispers grew louder, now all around her, pressing against her skull. "Leave before it's too late."
She spun around, looking for a way out, but the door was gone. The attic was now a maze of twisting corridors and endless walls, each more suffocating than the last. The eyes followed her every move, their gaze like the weight of 1,000 secrets. The whispers didn't stop. They came faster, sharper. "You don't care about this anymore." Eleanor's legs gave way and she collapsed onto the cold floor. The figure was closing in, its breath hot and foul against her neck, but she couldn't move. It reached out, its fingers brushing her skin, cold as death itself. Suddenly, the room went silent. The eyes, the whispers, the figure, all of it vanished. For a moment, Elanor thought it was over, that she had escaped. But when she looked down, she saw something that froze the blood in her veins. A symbol had been carved into her palm. It was the same as the ones on the walls, the words she had heard whispering in her mind. As she staggered to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest, the attic door creaked open as if inviting her to leave. But Elanor didn't want to know what lay beyond it. She had to escape. She had to get out. But as she ran back down the hallway, she realized the truth too late. The house wasn't just alive. It was hungry, and it had marked her. From that day forward, Elanor was never seen again. But the villagers who had once whispered about the house began to hear something new. Footsteps at night, the creak of a door opening, and the faintest whispers in the wind. If you listen closely enough, you might hear them too. The whispers of the house that never lets go. And if you're not careful, you might find yourself drawn to it, just like Elanor.